My name is Clara Bennett, and I'm 28 years old. If you had asked me 3 years ago what happiness looked like, I would have pointed right here to the life Ethan and I built together. We weren't glamorous, we weren't exciting, but we were ours. Ethan and I met in college. He was studying finance, always with a neat stack of highlighters in his bag, while I was majoring in English literature, scribbling notes, and messy margins. We started dating after sophomore year fell hard, and by 25, I was walking down the aisle with him. Ethan in his navy suit smiling like I was the only woman in the world. That memory is etched in me like stone. After the wedding, our life settled into rhythm. He worked at an accounting firm. I taught at a small private school. We saved every spare dollar, dreaming of a home with a backyard, maybe a golden retriever, maybe kids by the time I hit 30. Friday nights were ours. A booth at Olive Garden, laughter over breadsticks, or a Netflix binge sprawled across the couch. He'd fall asleep with his arm draped over me, his wedding band warm against my skin. Boring, maybe, but it was the kind of boring that felt safe, that felt like home. I used to tease him about it. We're the oldest young couple alive. I'd laugh and Ethan would shrug, grinning. Better old and happy than young and stupid, he'd reply. I believed him, but everything started to shift the day Ryan re-entered his life. Ryan was Ethan's college buddy, the life of the party type who got married too fast, cheated too often, and wound up divorced by 27. When his marriage collapsed, Ethan reached out offering sympathy. At first I thought it was sweet. Ryan needed a friend. But Ryan didn't come alone. He dragged along his entourage. Derek, a serial dater who treated women like seasonal wardrobe pieces, and Josh, who bragged about never being tied down. They were always at bars, clubs, poker nights, chasing the chaos Ethan and I had left behind years ago. I told myself it was harmless. He needs guy time, I reassured myself. I encouraged him to go out thinking it would make him appreciate our life even more. For a while it seemed fine. Ethan came home with stories about Ryan's disastrous dates, about Derek's ridiculous Tinder escapades. We laughed together, shaking our heads, but slowly something in his tone shifted. One night, as I curled against him on the couch, Ethan said casually, "You know Ryan thinks we settled down too early, that we missed out." I froze. Missed out on what? On life, on experiences, on figuring out who we are before we locked into each other. I laughed it off, kissed his shoulder. We know exactly who we are, and we're happy. But the words stuck to me like thorns. Over the next weeks, Ethan started dressing differently. Slim fit shirts, new cologne. He lingered in front of the mirror longer than I did. He stayed out later, sometimes midnight, sometimes 1 a.m. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his keys in the door. When he finally stumbled in, he'd reek of whiskey and cheap perfume that wasn't mine. I told myself it was just Ryan's influence, that Ethan was too smart to fall for it. But doubt seeped in. Then came the night he looked at me across the dinner table, eyes darker than usual, and asked, "Clara, don't you ever wonder what it would be like with other people?" The fork slipped from my hand. "Excuse me." He leaned back, almost defensive. "I mean, how do we know we didn't just settle? We got together so young. What if there's more out there?" Cold washed through me. "Ethan, I don't wonder because I chose you. I don't need anyone else." He sighed, shaking his head. "You don't get it. Ryan says marriage is just paper. We only get one life. Why not live it fully?" Fully. My voice cracked. "So you think what we have isn't living?" His silence answered for him. That night I lay awake in our bed, staring at the man I loved. His face looked the same, his breathing steady, but something was slipping a thread, unraveling between us. I used to believe love was unshakable once you promised it at the altar, but now I saw it could be chipped away one careless word at a time. Still I clung to hope. I told myself Ethan was just lost, pulled by the noise of his friends, that he'd remember who we were, that our boring, beautiful life would be enough. But in my gut I felt the storm coming, and storms don't wait for you to prepare. The first time Ethan came home after midnight, he brushed it off. "Poker ran long," he mumbled, tugging his shirt over his head. I wanted to believe him, but I could smell the lie. Cologne that wasn't his, the faint trace of someone else's perfume clinging to his sleeves. I told myself not to spiral, Trust Clara. Trust your husband. But the silences grew louder. The late nights multiplied. And every time Ethan spoke, it felt less like him and more like an echo of Ryan. One Saturday morning, as I was brewing coffee, he leaned against the counter and said, "Ryan hooked up with this girl last night. He says he hasn't felt that alive in years." I frowned. "Alive, Ethan?" "He's divorced, lonely and drinking himself to sleep most nights. That's not alive. That's desperation." But Ethan only shrugged. "Or maybe he's figuring out who he really is." The words slashed through me. I pressed the coffee mug too hard against the counter, the ceramic threatening to crack. "You know what I'm figuring out," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "That stable isn't a prison. It's what people spend their whole lives trying to find." He chuckled bitterly. "Stable is just another word for boring." The sentence hung between us like poison. That night lying in bed, I whispered, "Do you regret us?" He turned his face away. "I don't know." Something inside me cracked. In the weeks that followed, Ethan became a stranger. He bought expensive sneakers he didn't need, switched to tighter shirts that showed off muscles I had barely noticed before. His phone was always in his hand, screen turned away from me. I tried to reach him, planned date nights, cooked his favorite meals, left notes in his work bag like I used to. But he came home smelling of whiskey and neon lights, and my notes ended up crumpled in the trash. And then one Thursday night in March, the world tilted. I was curled on the bed reading a novel when he sat beside me restless. His knee bounced up and down, fingers twitching like he couldn't sit still. "Clara," he said, voice low, "we need to talk." I lowered my book. "About what?" His eyes flickered, almost guilty, almost defiant. "What if we tried something new?" I forced a smile, trying to play along. "Like salsa dancing a vacation, no." He exhaled, steeling himself. "I mean opening things up." The air went still. "Opening what up?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Our marriage." I laughed, a sound sharp and brittle. "That's not funny. I'm not joking, Clara." I stared at him. My Ethan, the man who once whispered baby names into my hair, who promised me forever at the altar, was asking me to share him with strangers. "You can't be serious." He leaned forward, eyes burning. "Think about it. We were so young when we got together. We never tried anything else. How do we know we are not missing out?" My throat tightened. "Because I already found what I was looking for. You, us." He shook his head. "That's not enough for me anymore." The silence was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the nightstand, each second heavier than the last. Finally, I found my voice. "Ethan, marriage isn't a buffet. You don't sample other options and then come back for your favorite. Marriage is a choice, a commitment." His lips curled into something almost cruel. "That's exactly what Ryan says you'd say." Controlling, afraid of change. My chest burned. Controlling. Because I want to keep the vows we made. Because I won't let you treat me like a safety net. He stood pacing. "You don't understand. It wouldn't be cheating if we both agreed to it. It could strengthen us." I rose from the bed, trembling. "Street or us, you think bringing other women into our marriage will make me love you more." He stopped, finally meeting my eyes. "It might make me stay." The words punched the air from my lungs. Stay. As if our love had become a bargain. As if I had to share him to keep him. I shook my head, tears streaming hot down my face. "If you need someone else to convince you to stay, then you're already gone." He didn't answer. He just turned, walked out of the room, and left me in the crushing silence of our bedroom. That night I curled into the corner of the bed, hugging his pillow like a lifeline. But it smelled different now, not of home, but of a man drifting farther and farther away. And for the first time since we said I do, I wondered if our vows had already been broken. The morning light filtered through our blinds like prison bars across the bed. Ethan wasn't beside me again. I found him in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone with that vacant smirk he always wore after a late night. He didn't even look up when he said, "I'm going to Vegas next weekend with the guys." I dropped the mug in my hand. It clattered against the counter, a crack zigzagging through the porcelain. "Vags," my voice rose. "Ethan, we're saving for a house. Every dollar counts." He waved me off. "Relax, it's one trip. One trip we can't afford." "And for what to drink and gamble with Ryan until you forget you're married?" His jaw tightened. I'm not asking for permission. The words were acid. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. So this is how you handle our marriage problems, by running away to Vegas. He smirked bitter. Maybe I need to know what I'm missing. Maybe then I'll know if this is enough. The kitchen blurred around me. Missing, I whispered. Ethan looked up, finally eyes cold. All my friends think you're controlling, that you won't let me share myself. Maybe they're right. Share. The word slashed through me like a knife. Share him, the man I gave my vows to, like he was a commodity, something to be passed around. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. Share you, I repeated. Ethan, you are my husband. We don't share each other. He shrugged, almost mocking. That's such an outdated way of thinking. Something in me broke. I walked past him into our bedroom and pulled his suitcase from the closet. My hand shook as I threw shirts and jeans inside. Every folded corner a piece of my anger. Every zipper a scream I couldn't let out. Behind me his voice hardened. What are you doing? I didn't look at him. Helping you explore. Clara, stop. This is... I spun around, eyes blazing through tears. You said I was controlling. Find and go. Be free. Live your life. But not as my husband. For the first time he looked unsettled. I was just talking. I didn't mean you meant every word. My voice cracked. I heard you. His face softened for a flicker, like the old Ethan was trying to crawl back. But then his pride swallowed him whole. I don't want a divorce, he muttered. You want to date other women, I said, pointing to the suitcase. I want a partner who chooses me. We're not the same anymore. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling. Then he grabbed his keys, muttered, I'll stay at Ryan's, and stormed out. The door slammed, rattling the walls, and then silence. A silence so complete it felt alive. It pressed against my skin, seeped into my lungs, settled heavy in the pit of my stomach. That night the bed was half empty. The pillow beside me was cold. For years I had fallen asleep to the sound of Ethan's breathing, the steady rhythm that anchored me. Now I stared at the ceiling, counting seconds. Each one a reminder that forever had an expiration date. I tried to pray, tried to cry, tried to pretend this was just a nightmare. But somewhere deep down I knew my marriage wasn't bending anymore. It had snapped. I loved him. God, I still loved him. But love couldn't hold together someone determined to walk away. And Ethan had already chosen the door. The house was too quiet. At first I thought I would miss the chaos of Ethan's late nights, the smell of whiskey clinging to his jacket, the endless arguments that ended with me curled up in tears. But when the silence finally came, it wasn't peace. It was grief dressed in stillness. 3 days passed without a word from him. On the 4th, I called a divorce attorney. She's abandoned the marital home, I explained, voice shaking. Then I caught myself. He's abandoned it. The attorney, a calm man named David Morrison, didn't flinch. That works in your favor. If you're ready to file, I'll have the papers drawn up this week. I hung up the phone. By Monday, the papers were signed. That's when the messages started. First, we need to talk. Then, I miss you. Then late at night, the one that made my throat tighten. I made a mistake. I blocked his number. He tried again from different phones. I blocked those too. But Ethan was relentless. He showed up outside my office one afternoon, pacing by the entrance like a ghost I couldn't get rid of. When my assistant buzzed me, I said, "Tell security I don't have a husband." Still, he didn't stop. 2 weeks later, I ran into him at the grocery store. My cart was half full. Milk bread, a bottle of red wine for the lonely evenings when I felt a presence at my side. "Clara," he said. My stomach dropped. I turned and there he was. Ethan looked different, hollowed. His skin was pale, his eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. The tailored shirt he wore hung loose like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. "I was confused," he said, voice shaking. "My friends, they gave me bad advice. I gripped the cart so hard my knuckles widened." "The same friends who told you I was controlling, the same friends who convinced you freedom meant destroying your marriage." He winced. "They don't understand what we had. They understood perfectly." My voice was low, sharp. "They wanted you single like them. And you let them." He stepped closer. "I see that now." "Clara, please, can we try again?" For a moment I almost faltered. This was the man I'd loved for years, the man who once planned a future with me. But looking at him now, all I saw was the wreckage he chose over me. Try what? I asked coldly. You wanted to explore. How's that going? His eyes glisten. It's horrible. The women, they don't care. They just want one night. They disappear after. I stared at him, tears burning my eyes, but not from sympathy, from rage. That's the thing about advice from broken people. Ethan considered a source. He swallowed. Ryan's dating someone from a bar. Derek went back to his ex. Josh doesn't even answer my calls anymore. They moved on and I'm the one left behind. My chest tightened, but I forced the words out. That's exactly what you chose. You left me for them and now you're alone. He reached for me, desperation flickering in his eyes. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be single. I want you. I stepped back. You don't want me. You want comfort. You want the stability you threw away. But Ethan, I can't be your consolation prize. His hand dropped. His shoulders sagged. For the first time I saw him break. I was wrong, he whispered. So wrong. What can I do to fix this? My heart splintered because I knew the answer, and it was one he couldn't accept. You can't fix this, I said softly. You asked me to share you. You can't ask that and still call it love. The silence that followed was deafening. Shoppers passed by carts squeaking, unaware that the ruins of a marriage lay between the frozen food aisle and the cereal boxes. Ethan's face crumpled, but I didn't stay to watch. I pushed my cart forward, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own choices. Back home, I poured that bottle of red wine into a glass and sat by the window, watching the night press against the glass. My chest ached, but beneath the grief, something steady flickered. Dignity. For the first time since Ethan said the word share, I felt like myself again. The divorce wasn't just a legal document. It was my line in the sand, my promise to myself. I would never beg for loyalty. I would never barter my self-worth for someone else's freedom. Ethan had made his choice, and I was making mine. 3 years have passed since I wheeled that grocery cart away from Ethan. The divorce became official 6 months after that night. He contested it at first, begging the court for time, dragging his feet like he could somehow stall the inevitable. But abandonment of the marital home made it straightforward. The house was awarded to me. He walked away with his suitcase and his freedom, the freedom he thought was worth more than us. I didn't hear from him for months after the court date. Then came the occasional texts, birthday messages, holiday greetings, late-night apologies. I never replied. I couldn't because somewhere along the way I started to heal. It wasn't easy. The first year I cried more nights than I slept. I missed the smell of his coffee in the morning, the way he hummed when he concentrated the warmth of his hand brushing mine across the couch. But every time the grief threatened to swallow me, I reminded myself of his words. Maybe I need to know what I'm missing. That sentence became my armor. It reminded me that the man I loved had already left long before I packed his suitcase. Time has a way of softening jagged edges. 1 year turned into 2. Slowly I found pieces of myself again. I went back to grad school, finished my master's degree in literature. I started hiking on weekends, joined a book club, painted the kitchen walls a cheerful yellow. Small rebellions that turned my house back into my home. And then when I least expected it, I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy. He didn't sweep me off my feet in a whirlwind of roses or promises. He was steady, kind, patient, a history teacher at the public high school. He asked questions and actually listened to my answers. He remembered the little things. How I liked my tea, the author I quoted too often, the way my hands shook when I spoke about Ethan. On our third date, I blurted, "Why would you want someone like me? I'm divorced. I'm broken." Daniel took my hand steady as ever and said, "You're not broken, Clara. You just outgrew someone who didn't deserve you." That was the night I realized love didn't have to be chaos. It could be calm, and calm could be extraordinary. Last spring, Daniel and I stood before our families and said vows of our own. Simple, quiet, heartfelt. No talk of sharing or missing out. Just 2 people choosing each other fully without conditions. When he slipped a ring on my finger, he whispered, "You're mine, and I'm yours. That's all I'll ever need." For the first time in years, I believed in forever again. Every so often, I still hear about Ethan. Small-town gossip travels faster than the wind. Ryan's freedom didn't last. His second marriage collapsed in under a year. Derek bounced back to his ex and broke up again weeks later. Josh disappeared to another city chasing a nightlife that didn't want him anymore. And Ethan, he never remarried. They say he dates, but nothing sticks. He's restless, drifting from woman to woman, always looking, never finding. Apparently, he complains that no one wants to commit anymore, that women are cold, untrusting, unwilling to settle. I don't feel sorry for him. He wanted to explore. He got exactly what he asked for. He just discovered the dating market was colder than the bed he abandoned. Sometimes when I'm lying beside Daniel at night, I wonder if Ethan ever remembers that Thursday in March, the night he sat on our bed and asked me to open our marriage. I wonder if he remembers the look on my face, the crack in my voice when I asked, "Do you regret us?" I hope he does. I hope he remembers that moment, because that was the night everything ended. Not when I filed for divorce, not when the papers were signed, but the moment he asked me to share him. Those words cost him everything. Now, as I sit on my porch with Daniel's arm around my shoulders, watching the sun dip low across the quiet street, I feel something I once thought I'd lost forever. Peace. Ethan thought boring was a curse. He thought stability meant he was missing out. But here's the truth. Boring is underrated. Boring is the man who comes home every night, who asks about my day, who remembers to buy milk without being asked. Boring is the warmth of a life built brick by brick, steady and unshaken by passing storms. Ethan chased chaos. I chose calm, and calm turned out to be extraordinary.